Among those who are in the know about the Nazi situation in Ukraine, there is a growing awareness that the U.S. empire is increasingly going to import its tactic in Ukraine of weaponizing fascist militias to carry out its malign ends. There's an awareness that as class conflict in the imperial center intensifies, the same tactic of using far right paramilitaries to exact violence upon the population with impunity is going to be utilized in America as well. We're seeing this with how people like the Buffalo shooter have been using Azov battalion symbols. We're seeing this with how people like the recent Italian neo Nazi terrorist attack plotters have been linked directly to Azov. And we're seeing this with how white supremacists from around the world, especially in the United States, have been traveling to Ukraine to gain military training. And when you look at the conditions of the United States when it comes to the urban and rural divide, you see how if a class confrontation here were to play out, come to its logical conclusion, the advantages that the Nazis in Ukraine have will look a lot like the advantages that they're going to have in the United States from a strategic standpoint. Because in Ukraine, the fascists have been able to gain a great land advantage. They've been able to gain a lot of territory control over a lot of localities. And when you look at places like where I am in rural America, the fascists are also going to have a great opportunity to gain territorial control. I believe that when the class conflict escalates, the fascists are going to mobilize all across the countryside, and for a time, they're going to gain a great territorial advantage. But this story goes both ways, because the advantage that the revolutionary side in the Ukraine war, the Russian side has, is going to apply to the revolutionary side in America's coming confrontation. The Russians have been able to keep control over the most strategically important parts of eastern and southern Ukraine. They've been able to keep control over the territories that they've been able to use to continue demilitarizing Ukraine's armed forces, to continue to exhaust the forces of both Ukraine and NATO as a whole. I believe that when the class conflict escalates in America, it's going to be concentrated within the cities. The revolts are going to be concentrated within the urban areas, and that's going to be an opportunity for revolutionaries across the country, including in the rural areas, to come together and work to defeat the fascist menace that is going to be trying to carry out a horrific purge in the rural areas. And that is not to say that the rural areas should be abandoned as organizing spaces, because the rural areas are disproportionately poor in certain ways. There's a great amount of rural poverty, and there's also plenty of non-white people, Jewish people, LGBT people who the neo-Nazis in areas like where I am are going to be trying to pick off when they get the opportunity. So we're going to need to build community defense networks to minimize the harm that these devils are going to cause. But overall, even though there's going to be great human cost within this coming conflict, the calculus I've come to is that the revolutionary forces in America are going to be able to defeat American fascism in the equivalent way that the revolutionary forces in the Russia-Ukraine conflict are defeating Ukrainian fascism. That is to concentrate their efforts within the places where their strengths are the greatest. In both cases, the revolutionary side's strengths are the greatest in terms of focusing on strategic advantage rather than obsessing over the immediate goal of gaining the greatest territorial advantage. That's what the fascists are most obsessed with. And they're going to be gloating about their territorial advantage during those moments, like how the fascists in Ukraine are gloating about their territorial advantage. But ultimately, they're going to be vulnerable to their own capacity to exhaust themselves. That represents the ultimate hope.